Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we explore the interface between creativity and spirituality within the context of what we're calling conscious acting. But before we dive into that very interesting domain, I just want to note a couple of things from the news today that I think are important for us to contemplate since we've been covering various aspects of world events, as you know. And today, the Nobel Peace Prize was awarded to Nargis Mohammadi in Iran, who is currently serving a 30-year sentence for protesting around the hijab, this headdress that the Iranian mullahs insist that every woman wear. You're all familiar because we've been covering it fairly extensively on Humanity Rising, the protests that surrounded the death of Mahsa Amini in September of 2022. And how young women really led a very potent revolutionary struggle that was met with extraordinary repression, killings, imprisonment, beatings, and the latest, of course, if you've been tracking the news, happened last week when a little 16-year-old girl, Armita Garamond, went into the subway in Tehran not wearing the hijab. And you could see the footage on CCTV where she walked in, vibrant 16-year-old, and a minute or so later, she's being dragged out, completely unconscious, having been assaulted by the morality police that monitor these things in all public domains across Iran, and now has been hospitalized in a coma for the last week. And like Nargis Mohammadi, who is in prison and not allowed any visitors, so her husband and her children and her extended family aren't allowed to visit. Similarly with little Armita Garamond, she's in the hospital and her family is forbidden from any visitation. And so for the Nobel Peace Prize to be extended to this woman in an Iranian prison at this moment, when women have been in the forefront, really for the first time, certainly in modern history. If you think about the revolutions that have taken place, what's been happening around the death of Mahsa Amini over the last 18 months or so has been an extraordinary surge of women, life, freedom, which is the slogan that they have been seeking to embody under extraordinary duress. Just think of the courage that Armita Garamond demonstrated in being willing in the midst of that totalitarian evil to walk into a public place without a hijab. So when one celebrates peace, one thinks of the honor of getting a Nobel Peace Prize, but one does not get that kind of an accolade by the international community without extraordinary courage and fortitude and resilience in the face of oppression. So I just wanted to celebrate Nargis Mohammadi today, who has just won the Nobel Peace Prize. We want to now turn to a very interesting subject around conscious acting, which requires bringing together creativity and spirituality, human authenticity in very deep and complex ways. And I've had the good fortune of meeting Celia Anne Browne, who is an actor, a coach, a mentor, who's been acting and coaching and teaching acting for many, many years. She's based in Paris. She joined us this last year in Chartres for our mystery school there. And we became acquainted. So when she told me what she did through a couple of Zoom calls, I invited her and several of her colleagues to join us on Humanity Rising, because as you all know, we try to cover every conceivable issue that is of interest to humankind in this most pressing moment when nothing less than a uplift of human consciousness will suffice to save us from our own self-destruction. So Celia, I want to welcome you to Humanity Rising. She has a presentation. She'll be introducing two colleagues, and then I'll circle back, as I always do, toward the end to deepen the dialogue. Celia, I turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Jim. It's such an honor to be here, and I have been tuning into Humanity Rising for the past 3 years, I think since the very beginning, the first day I was there. I don't know how that happened, but I saw it on Facebook or something, but it's been really pivotal in my life, actually.
Thank you.
Community, it's really beautiful, and I'm so honored to be here. And it feels a little silly as an acting teacher, but I will explain that in a moment. I'm actually not acting now. I grew up acting, and then I stopped acting early on because I got into yoga and meditation teaching in California, because I had this sense that I wanted to contribute in a higher way. So I did that for 15 years in California and Los Angeles. And also I'm a clinical herbalist and very passionate about the holistic arts, like everybody here, much of the audience. And then it sort of, life happened that I missed the arts, and I was endorsed by a master teacher who I had studied with for like 15 years. I was in the class, because though I wasn't acting, I love the craft. And what I want to share with the viewers today is that actors are often just so misunderstood, and it seems like they're fake or they're pretending, but they're not. The really good ones are so invested in deeply investigating the character and telling the story, and preferably it's a really beautiful, insightful story, transformational tale. And so I'd love to share that with you today. I have a very short presentation I will whiz through, and then I will introduce Krista Holland, who is my dear friend and a wonderful person who is a sacred drummer, as well as Dr. Ronald Alexander, also known as Dr. Ron, from Los Angeles, and he is a psychotherapist and an author, and he has written a book, Core Creativity, I think is the name of it. Let me check. It's Core Creativity, the mindful way to unlock your creative self. So this is exciting. And this consciousness creativity field is really interesting to me, and hopefully it is to you too. It involves neuroscience. It's very interesting, very fascinating. So I'm going to just segue right into my short presentation. Thank you so much. for joining me. And I will just get my, hold on one second. Okay, good. Can you see, you can see this fine? George, can everyone see this fine? No problem? Yes, no?
No, I can't see anything yet.
You can't see anything yet. Ah, you know what? Wait, hold on one second. I'm so sorry. Here we go. Okay. Let's see, open. Okay. Can you now see my screen?
Yes, we do.
Beautiful. Okay, I'm just going to put it into full view to make it even better. Okay, so these are some of the beloved actors that I work with. I've been teaching in Paris for 8 years and teaching acting about 10. And it's a very international community. I'm also a coach. So I coach international actors as well as I'm a teacher. And I worked for 6 of the years at Bilingual Acting Workshop in Paris. And it's been really an extraordinary experience. It's very deep, much more than you would think. So just looking first at these photos, initially, we work with the actor's instrument because the actor wants to improve their instrument. So they look at the psychological, physical, spiritual aspects of themselves that they want to bring consciousness to and raise self-awareness. So we do a lot of breathing exercises, meditation exercises, and some of the things that I'm talking about today aren't just what I do. It's what they do in the acting craft, and there's lots of different schools. It's just the way that I'm teaching it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about conscious acting as such, and then time permitting, I will talk about the conscious actor lifestyle, which is something that I'm creating, which is more about right livelihood and being in alignment with your core values. So you don't feel like, so an actor doesn't feel like they're waiting for someone to hire them. They can create their own work. They can get a day job that they're also passionate about. They can do projects that they love and say no to projects they don't want to do. And just with the vision of sort of up-leveling the industry in a way, because there's also the dark side of the industry, which I'm just going to focus a lot on what is great about it and about acting class and why people go to acting class. So you can see in the top photo and in the bottom photo, the top photo, the actress is doing a sort of empowerment exercise. So we do a lot of ego boosting, like she's doing, that's an empowerment ego boosting exercise. Where down below on the left, the actor is working on a very beautiful monologue from Death of a Salesman by Arthur Miller. And so this particular actor felt like 2 things. He wasn't expressing enough vocally. He felt like he was held back vocally. So we worked with him on this, as well as he didn't feel like he was able to get in touch emotionally and feel the vulnerability that is required for the role. So we worked on this with him. This is a very powerful exercise, and you see him doing this here. And then on the bottom, in the middle, we do a lot of relationship work and human interaction. And I'll read you a little list of some of the focus when we do some of this relationship work. The key kind of training is being in the moment, being real, presence, authenticity, truth telling, which we need a lot of these days, experiencing, expanding your emotional range, emotional intelligence, interpersonal relationship skills, deep listening skills, and that's of prime importance, like really listening and not worried about what you need to say, but really listening to the other person. Selfless involvement exercises, which works a lot for relaxation. And when you get out of yourself, then you can relax because you're not focused on yourself. Connection, cultivating trust, honoring your impulses, doing impulsivity exercises to get you out of the thinking mind, very important. Going with your gut instinct, intuition, improvisation, play, and very important, elevating awareness, sensitivity, empathy, and compassion for the human condition. And this is what the actor, maybe this isn't known to the general public, but we're all about humanity. Acting class is really like a path to enlightenment in a way, because it's all about reenacting life stories, reenacting life scenes. As a teacher and as a director would, all we're doing is looking at the reenactment of life scenes and analyzing them. What is going on with this human being? Who, what, where, why, and the conditions. So it's powerful. And then on the bottom, so this particular group, we work together like 3 years. Some of us just get very close. I'm the teacher, but it's like a family. And so you can tell from that photo how close everybody is. And then on the top, in the second and on the third, they are exploring the script, which is, of course, why they're doing it. And it's a very exciting time, that initial read of the script, because you're getting to see what is the story, what is the co-creation going to be that you're going to be playing, the roles that you're going to play to realize this script. So everything is about the script. So that is some of the initial exercises and ways into the actor's craft is working on themselves to be more effective communicators and more effective humanitarians. And then here we have these beautiful actors who I also like so much. And here they are exploring the characters. So some of them, well, everyone here has been filmed. So these are just photos from when they were filmed. And hold on 1 second. So as you can see, this part of the craft, exploring the character, is all about embodiment of the character. So again, like they do with the actor does with their instrument, then we look at the physical, psychological, spiritual aspects of the character. And the actors do a lot of research. They work very hard, the who, what, where, why, the hopes, the dreams, the goals, the tragic flaws, the obstacles that get in the way of the heroic journey of the character. It's complex, and sometimes, like with a very complex character, if you look at the actress who has tears, and then the one on the bottom right, his whole countenance, his whole posture is different than how he normally is. So in some of these complex characters, we might work with archetypes. It might appropriate for Humanity Rising. It can get shamanistic. It's a shape-shifting almost. And you can see that they just totally transform, and it's a lot of fun, and it's very profound to do this. I spend some time, definitely what's important and part of my conscious actor lifestyle teachings is to do it in a healthy way. There would be a long extended subject, but it is important for me to impart that we want to do these things consciously. Therefore, we want to get very into the role and the storytelling, but you don't want to lose yourself in it. You don't want to go crazy in it, because that's the dark side. We'll just mention a little bit, the dark side of like Hollywood. We sort of glamorize, when an actor goes into the cave for 5 months and just eats canned corn because he's working on a particular role, and then he comes out and he's a sort of completely out of it and crazy, and then he gets back into his substance abuse or his addiction, and this is not glamorous. And I do not want to be supporting this lifestyle. So we have certain exercises where the actor then will be very in the character, in the world of the character, but then they are able to step out of the character and regain, balance themselves, breathe, ground, be present. Some of these other photos, like in the middle here, so they're working strictly with imagination. So there's there's all kinds of techniques, but two very important techniques that we use in acting are drawing from our own personal life or imagination. And again, when you draw from your personal life, it's more what we hear about with the actor's studio. And you have to be careful, honestly, with that. And it can be very powerful, though, to do it, or just to simply parallel, make a choice from your own life that would seem appropriate for the character's life, a parallel. Or you work strictly with imagination and create from that place. When you use both those techniques, whether it's drawing from your own life or creating through imagination, then you are using the senses. It's a sensory process, and every human being, that's how we create, with the senses. So there, in the schools of acting, there are little disagreements about it. Like, my school's better because we draw from our own personal life, and my school's better because no, you don't want to do that. You want to just create through imagination. When I think really we are just always creating, and I tell my actors all the time that everything is perception, as we know, and as we know here at Humanity Rising. And therefore, what we see, we're creating. And therefore, when we work on the characters, what you're seeing through the eyes of the character is the character's experience. And letting the actor loop in more and more, trusting that after they've worked a lot on the character, to know that what they're feeling and experiencing moment to moment is appropriate for the character. It's the magic if, could it be that he also feels afraid if the actor is nervous? Could it be that the character is nervous? So it's that kind of thing. It's very deep, it's very wonderful. And sometimes it doesn't have to be complicated, and you can just breathe and be very present with the other actor and work together to co-create and go into that imaginal world. So the next three are a little shorter, so I hope I'm not taking up too much time. So this is the audience speaking, and the power of the audience. the audience and the actors, especially in live performance, but also with the camera, the actors and the camera, there's a relationship, there's a flow of energy. And there's so much a flow of energy. I mean, the actor is dependent on the audience. They need the audience for feedback to sort of, let them know how they're doing. Is this funny? Is this good? Is this sad? And this, there's so much of that flow of energy that it's almost like the audience is the third character. And so there's always this awareness, the actor always has awareness that they are interacting with another actor, but there's also an observer, a witness at all times, which is the camera or the audience. And that's also why it's very important for the actor not to be so in the character that they, lose it, because they have to have what Eric Morris calls the 11th level of consciousness, the ability to also then step out of it, and very importantly, taking direction. If you're going to work with the director may then tell you to make an adjustment, and you need to have conscious awareness. So that's an important point. And as you see, the audience is just as important as the actors. I call this In the Light, which is interesting, something that I've been thinking about and in preparation for speaking today, that it is a little odd for people to desire to be actors. It's a little crazy to really want to dress up and play these different characters. It's fun. It's the magical child. But I think there is also something that I have noticed about being in the light. It is when the spotlight is on, the camera is on, or the stage lights are on. And this really could be for any performer, for a dancer, a musician, or a speaker. There is the feeling of being seen. And we all want to be seen. And it feels really good, and it's warm. The lights are warm. So this is part of the appeal, I think, is wanting to be in the light and be seen, whether it's you being seen or then the actors, through the character, they're being seen. But I think that that's a really potent point about it. I think that that's all I want to say about it, except that there are these moments too when we have great speakers or great performers and they're in the light in this way. And this is, to me, all of this is spiritual. All this communing with human nature is spiritual. And also, when the light is on and you've got this enormously magnificent speaker or performer, every audience, we all know as the audience that there can be moments in a great performance where time stops, where space alters, and we are just hanging on we just can't wait. There's like silence in the audience. What is he going to do? What is he going to say? And it's almost, without getting too esoteric, but it sometimes does feel there's this sort of download or this pouring forth, this soulful pouring forth that somehow does seem like co-created with the divine, or we don't know, but it's very, very powerful. And what we all long for, to have those moments and to experience those moments which are a certain type of union. And then the last, so this is the last slide. So this is just about all this work, which is very consciousness raising, is about community. And it creates a lot of warm feelings. People have expressed a lot, they're sharing a lot, they're playing out these relationships that don't exist in their real life. They're telling these stories, and it just creates very strong communities. Sometimes they stay in touch for years after the project. Sometimes it's just immersed in the world of the play, you know, going to that altar, the world of the play, the world of the film, and then it's done, it's a wrap, and they say goodbye, and then they don't talk to each other again. But it's a very, very creative and very conscious and very spiritual. So that's all that I have to say. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, correct? Yes, I'm going to stop sharing. Okay, great. And now I guess I will introduce Krista. Thank you so much for listening to me. I hope that that was interesting for everyone. It was wonderful to share. And now I'm going to, Krista, do I unmute you or?
I can unmute myself. Hello.
Yeah, that'd be great, honey.
Wow. Yes. Thank you. Thank you, Celia. That intersection, this intersection, are you wanting to introduce me or?
Do you want me to introduce you? Would you like me to read your bio? I have it here. Or not? Or would you just like to go?
However you'd like to weave me in.
I'm going to read it really quickly, if that's okay. Krista Holland is a distinguished educator, accomplished frame drummer, faculty member at the Shift Network, devoted historian of the Sacred Drum, and the visionary behind the Sacred Drum Academy. Through the Academy, she imparts her extensive research and training in frame drumming and in-depth exploration of the frame drum's ancient mythology, lore, and polycultural significance as a global instrument of ritual, healing, and transformation.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this introduction and invitation. This subject of consciousness, creativity, and spirituality has, I think, such deep meaning for these times because there is a crisis of meaning for people. So watching what you're doing with the conscious acting lifestyle, I think there's so many things for us really as humans that we can really take to heart and to deepen this collective conversation about where we are as a culture and where we want to go. So much of what you brought in about the senses and about the shape-shifting element and being in the light and being in touch with those deeper aspects of our humanity. I think it's really true in so many of the arts is that it really is a way for us to tap into that essential quality. And I think we can't really underestimate the power of creativity and art in our consciousness and in our spirituality. So in the invitation to join this conversation, I was thinking about the creative path really in general. And what I do is within music and with art and this drumming that we do, we're looking really at the ancient archaeological record of art, really, and how much art has really been key in the development of our humanity, and creativity has been key in the development of our humanity and our culture. Right now, what I see, again, is this crisis of meaning for so many people. And when you, Celia, talked about the audience being the third character, and I think in live performance, that's true. My concern is for the people, and especially the young ones, that are only taking in entertainment, and how that can actually leave a deep void in people. I don't think we can really underestimate the grief actually in people who haven't been seen and who haven't been able, for whatever reason, to explore their own creative potential. So I just want to pause on that moment, in this moment. The grief that people feel if they haven't been seen, or if they haven't been able to explore their own creative potential. And so I'm thinking about this in the school system and in a full spectrum of ages, from the young ones coming up all the way to the elders, that we can't underestimate the power of creativity in human potentiality. And it does connect to spirituality, it connects to consciousness. And so funding for the arts in our education is so important. Allowing people different avenues for self-expression, supporting the arts so that people in their elder years can also explore that human potentiality that comes through creativity. And my message today also is for those of you that are here and are engaging in this subject with us of creativity and spirituality and consciousness. The invitation is for you to continue to explore that regardless of your age. And there's so many different ways, of course, that you can explore your own creativity. I loved this piece that Celia brought in her conscious acting lifestyle and conscious acting art that she is the visionary of, the senses, and how we can continue to develop our senses. It seems like a very simple thing, but I think that some of these aspects of ourself, the senses in particular, can actually atrophy or go dormant in people. The sense of smell, for instance, it's a way that we can navigate through the world. And some people have a very acute sense of smell, and some people have let that go dormant or atrophy. Our sense of hearing, our sense of touch, our sense of taste, the visual component, this idea that what we take in, we alchemize and we digest, both the bitter and the sweet. So working with those elements in a way that is enhancing our connection to source, our connection to spirit. And so this subject, creativity, spirituality, consciousness, I think that creativity is really deeply connected to spirituality. If we look to the ancient world, we see this record, this archival, archaeological record of humans making art. And many anthropologists believe that those beginning expressions of art, the cave paintings throughout Europe, for instance, were really an expression also of the first religion, perhaps, which some anthropologists say was really shamanism. And so for many of us, we're tethering to these ancient roots as we, as a humanity, speed off into this technologically unknown future. So I see it as a tethering, like holding the line to these ancient instincts to make art, to express. And through that expression, even if it's as simple as, molding clay or making a meal or being in the present moment with a beloved in an artistic conversation and this exchange, that is a way for us to also connect deeply to our spirituality and our consciousness. So thank you to Humanity Rising and to Celia Anne Browne for weaving me into this conversation that I think has so much depth and value and meaning for us as humans on this journey. So thank you, Celia.
You don't want to just say for a moment, Krista, about your sacred drum? Or
Sure, I could say a little bit about that. I'm really a polymath myself. Yoga, landscaping, working with plants, working with the olfactory sense through studying very deeply essential oils and their quality in transforming consciousness. And that all weaves into what I offer through the Sacred Drumming Academy, which is studying the frame drum. Someone might associate that with the shaman drum, with the beater, only in this style of drumming, it's the same look, this just very simple round drum, but we're playing with our fingers and our hands, barehanded. And this style of drumming also goes very, very far back into our ancient history, 5,000 years or more of people playing drums with the bare hands. And there is a lot of deep ancient lore and mythology and history of these drums being played in the mystery schools and in different ceremonies and rituals all over the world, really. It's not as well known in some regions of the world how widespread this frame drumming or sacred drumming was. So there's right now a renaissance in this style of drumming, and part of it is because it has this incredible ancient history, and we could say her story and really our story of using music and drumming as a way to transform consciousness and really to organize culturally. There's some theory in anthropology that music making was part of how we created an evolutionary advantage. And so that's part of what we do in the Sacred Drumming Academy that really kind of weaves into this conversation today about creativity, spirituality, and consciousness. So that's a little bit about the Academy. Thank you so much, and I'll pass it over to you.
thank you so much, Krista. I wish everyone wants you to play, but I don't think we have time. Maybe at the end we'll have a moment. Dr. Ron.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. How are you? It's so good to see you, Dr. Ron.
Good to see you too, Celia.
Would you like me to read your bio, or you want to go right into it?
Let me go right into it.
Sounds perfect.
And I'll just start by saying that I've been in, this is my 5th decade of being here in Hollywood as a psychotherapist, very somatically in mind, body, and meditation and yogic therapy oriented, as well as a creativity consultant for the music, the television, the film, and in the last 15 years, the .com business, where I've consulted to Apple and Sun Microsystems on the topics of creativity, and most importantly, on spirituality and mindfulness meditation. And I'd like to build on this holy and sacred word that Celia and both Krista introduced in their presentations, which is, the notion of the divine. And we oftentimes speak about that creativity is really at its core and its essence level. And in my new book, Core Creativity, that when we're really quiet and that we slow down and we enter into the portal of what I call in the first stage of 3 stages of core creativity. And the first stage is entering the portal of absorbing mind. And that's the first stage where one begins to, if you could imagine that creativity is a house of self with many, many sacred rooms in it. And the very first room of sacred entrance is the room of absorbing mind. An absorbing mind has 2 access domains. Andy Warhol, once I was in Thailand on my way back from India, and when I was traveling around India, I was taken to this wonderful garden, this flower lotus garden. And I was absolutely touched and stunned that the most beautiful flower for me in all of India is the white lotus. And I was asked to come early in the morning when the sun was coming up so that I could watch it actually unfold. And it lives in a mud pond. And either Celia or Krista or both of them mentioned the importance of the alchemical transformation. You see, in Jungian psychology, the mud is a symbolic representation of our shadow. It's also a symbolic representation in Jungian psychology of that of which is the void. You know, the mud is the void. And in Buddhist psychology and in Buddhist creativity thinking, there's a shastra, and it's called the Prajnaparamita Sutta. And in essence, it says, from emptiness, void, comes everythingness, all, and from everythingness returns to no thingness, again, void. And when we embrace this concept in Jungian psychology of mining down alchemically to touch into our inner mud in a really positive and an awakening sense, is that we're touching into and accessing very deep and very rich and very textured aspects of ourself that are essential for tapping into and mining our core creativity. In 1993, I had the wonderful opportunity to be invited to meet up with the musical band U2 in Dublin for the tail end in Ireland, both in Cork and in Dublin, for the tail end of their Zooropa tour, where they were really pushing forward their new album called Achtung Baby. And what was really phenomenal about their own creative process as a band was, if you look at the record before that, which was the Joshua Tree album, it had more of a kind of sonic and acoustic and Holy Requiem qualities to it. Whereas the Achtung Baby record seemed to come out of almost like a galactic place, you know, the sound from the heavens. It was completely unusual. And so one night we were, of course, after the concert at the Royal Dublin Fairgrounds, we were sitting in the pub, being Irish, we're all Irish. What are you going to do after a concert? Go and have a few Guinnesses. And so, and this was all social conversation. And we were talking, and the lead guitarist, Dave Evans, turned to me and he said, you know, I've been dreaming new sounds, and this whole new record came from that when we decided after Joshua Tree that we were going to take 3, 4, 5, 6 months and go and live in Berlin, where it's really dark and rainy and foggy and cold. And we were frequenting after-hour and underground music clubs. And we were really absorbing and taking in and allowing ourselves to be nurtured by going outside of our own mindsets. And so it's really, really important in this first portal, in the first room in the house of the core self of creativity, is that we absorb ourselves and we immerse ourselves first in the external world, where whether you take in new music, or for someone like me, when I'm working on a new book, I go to as many art museums and art openings that I can. I'll sit and, for example, I'll spend days or weeks opening up Yoko Ono's beautiful book, One, and going through the history of all of her photographs and art exhibitions. I'll look at Pinterest online. And so I start to absorb and to take in and to immerse myself in new forms of music. And in absorbing mine, in the conversation with The Edge from U2, he said, before the new sound for Achtung Baby came in, that he found himself dreaming and actually hearing the music in advance of any songwriting, just hearing the sounds, driving around, whether he was doing yoga or meditating or walking. And I had the unique opportunity to just the week prior to meeting up with the group, I'd been at Mozart's house in Salzburg, outside of Vienna, Austria. And I came upon one of Mozart's journals. And I was just immediately drawn to this page. And there was in big letters, the word, I open my mind. And when I open my mind, I awaken. And so it was like a lightning bolt to me. And so I was talking with U2, and I said to Dave, I think when you are downloading, you're bringing online a part of your spiritual consciousness that's outside of what William James, the great religious psychologist from Harvard University, he said that we have many states of consciousness, but our most profound state is the sacred and the divine state of consciousness. And when we move from absorbing mind, the second stage of consciousness for accessing core creativity is open mind. So I borrowed that term from Mozart, and I actually wrote my first book, Wise Mind, which is a Buddhist saying, open mind. And so that we go from absorbing, and we first go out into the world, and we need to immerse ourselves into the mud of art forms and music forms and literature, and as much culture and as much ideas and creative imagination that's outside of our own mindset that we operate in. The late, great Miriam Polster, who's a very renowned and highly respected Gestalt therapist, who was one of my mentors when I was in my 20s and 30s. And she said, in order to experience being creative, and in order to experience the self as unfolding into the richness of one's creativity, one must each and every day put on a new lens in which you're looking out. And at the same time, as Rumi, the great poet, says, he says, the heart of creativity, the door opens outward into the world, and it opens inwardly into the heart. So it's very, very important. And I think it was Celia who said that there's importance of connecting with our divinity. And Krista mentioned connecting to our spirituality. So that I think is really, really essential when you want to mine into the core texture of something that's unique, that you want to bring forth something that's original, you need to begin to put on a different set of lenses for seeing. And what we say in Dzogchen Tibetan Buddhism, we need to sit into the spaciousness and expand into the richness of the big view, appreciating that as we empty our mind of all preconceived thought and ideas, we free up that fertile void of tremendous richness. So we lose our mind and we come into our sensations. And that's where the importance of the heart is involved, in the sense of coming out of the mind, of the thinking, rational mind, and moving into the domain of what we call in Buddhist practice, not knowing, not needing to know, not doing, and not needing to do. So not knowing, not doing, not needing to know, and not needing to do takes us into this quiet place of empty, fertile void, where the feminine, the Gaia, and we say in Jungian psychology, the importance of you embrace the feminine to bring forth the creative. Because when we think about creation and core creativity, it is a feminine portal. It's a feminine energy of softness, of receptivity, of fertility, of a sense of mixing all the alchemical qualities, that I've been talking about, into a kind of a rich cauldron of originality. And to arrive at originality, you also need to embrace arriving at source. And I oftentimes refer to, when I'm doing mindfulness meditation, teaching it with patients, or doing hypnosis with creatives, is the importance of bringing forth possibility and bringing forth the richness of the inventive and the original by setting oneself free of the masculine energy of needing to create. When you can abandon the need to create, you begin to open into a much more softer and gentler and fertile channel in the source of the self, where then you're able to begin to resource, so that we go from the outside of immersion and absorption to the inside, where we pay attention to our dreams at night and we write them down, and we pay attention to our symbols and the myths and the motifs that come from our dreams. And then we spend time, whether it's sitting quietly in meditation or prayer or contemplation or in Tai Chi, or it's out as the Taoists do, the many creatives that I interviewed in my book. And what was very interesting is 75% of the creatives that I interviewed in my book, and they all said that they take, in the afternoon, they take a walk after they've been working, whether it's in music or art or in writing, and they take a walk and they immerse themselves in nature. So then very quickly, the last stage of core creativity. So there's absorbing mind, there's open mind. And the last stage is activating mind. And that means that it isn't enough to just go and sit on a mountain or sit in your room. It's important that you then have to create. You have to take the steps. You need to envision first, but then you have to activate. And lastly, I just wanted to share a couple of very important quotes from other creatives. Robbie Robertson, who just passed away, is a great lead guitarist of the band. He said that in the formulation of his activation of his own creativity, is the creative process is a process catching you off guard. You write about it, what you know, where you've been, who you know. Creativity comes from the womb of emptiness, and creativity comes from the trunk of your imagination.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you so much, Ron. Dr. Ron. So why don't you both come on? I guess Jim, is Jim there? Would Jim like to come on and do some Q&A? Is he there? He left. We can also do some drumming. That was Ron, that was wonderful, and about creativity being from the feminine. It's a non-linear process.
Yes, and to really activate, particularly from males. Females just know because you're feminine, but men, all of our culture and our conditioning takes us away early in life from being soft and being kind and being receptive. And so I oftentimes say we as men, we need to worship at the altar of the sacred divine. And both of you, Krista and Celia, referenced the sacred and the divine, of the divine feminine, of which everything comes through the feminine channel.
Yes, thank you. But also for men, because there's so many brilliant male artists, of course. So the masculine and feminine within too. There was one thing that I didn't say about, I've noticed we're gender fluid in my classes, meaning that now the women are coming in and they want to play stronger roles and they don't want to play the victim so much, and there's a lot less crying, where the men are coming in saying that they want to feel more emotionally available and they want to access their vulnerability, and they're crying. So we have this sort of, and the women love to play the men's roles. It's an interesting shift that's going on with the masculine and the feminine.
Yes,
absolutely. Right now. Yes. So Jim.
Well, thank you. Just to note what Ron and you were just talking about, it's an extraordinary thing, the transposition of values and perspectives and even political orientations, given the increasing gender fluidity that is happening all around the world at this moment. We're in one of those extraordinary times where what was set in stone, what was given by divine revelation, on Mount Sinai as providential dictum, is now giving way to a whole new human experience where even the most fundamental categories of sexuality and masculinity and femininity are really morphing into a much more available capacity and faculty for people everywhere in new kinds of ways. And of course, aspects of the culture, are fighting women's sovereignty, in an ongoing way, and the trans and so forth and so on. But, what you all are speaking about is really in some ways at the vanguard of human transformation, as the shackles of the past are breaking down in many ways. But I wanted to talk specifically about the creativity involved in acting in particular, because there's one creativity for me as an example coming on Humanity Rising.
I think you want to act. Do you want to be an actor, Jim? Maybe you want to come to acting class.
Yeah. But it's one thing for me to be me, but I would imagine that there's a whole other kind of cognitive framing and creative functioning when I'm trying to be somebody else. I'm trying to take on a role. When actors and actresses do that on the silver screen, they literally become someone else. And so I'd love for you all to discuss the specific challenge of creativity and spirituality in playing a role that isn't naturally you. I think that would be a really interesting aspect of creativity and spirituality to explore under this general remit that we're discussing today of conscious acting.
Well, I'm the only one here that is speaking actually about the acting, right? So, but just a little more about it. So there's just a lot of techniques that you would do. I showed in the second photo with the actors. So you do a lot of research about who, what, where, why, what is the physicality of the role, what is the psychology of the role, what is the spirituality of the role, and then you would either draw from parallel life experiences or a song or a smell or a painting, right? You could anything could be your inspiration. A rose could be your inspiration. You could play a whole character, a female character as a rose, and no one has to know. Or an animal. There's a lot of animal work, which is really fun. To feel that you really know who this character is, that you've embodied this character. It's a lot. It's complicated. Everyone thinks it's, I don't think people, maybe the general public understands. So maybe this helps demystify what it's about.
Yeah. I just noticed that David Stoney was saying that he hopes that I don't do any shape-shifting right in front of everybody. And, thank you, David. I'll stay seated in my chair and not succumb to becoming somebody else in front of everybody.
I mean, what for beyond, Humanity Rising and talking about acting class, it brings a lot of compassion and empathy for the human experience.
Yeah.
You play those characters and you grow, you love those characters, you defend those characters. And even if they're a horrible character, you have to find qualities that are beautiful in them, and to somehow, they're misunderstood or they're operating in their shadow, archetype. You could be doing a character in the shadow archetype.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. And I'd like to turn to you, Krista, for a moment, because I was very intrigued by, the fact that you do this drumming, because that the drumming is so primal. It's arguably the most ancient musical form, is just to start banging on something with a rhythm, and deeply embedded in the shamanic practitioners all over the world. And as we know from history, poetry preceded prose, and music preceded language. And so I would love to hear more about your journey into drumming and how, given everything that Ron has been talking about being available to the open heart, shall we say, in the meditative spiritual journey. Would love to hear more from you about what drew you into drumming, and what do you find in drumming that is particularly potent in animating this interface between creativity and spirituality?
Thank you. Let's see what the drum has to say.
There you go.
Yes, drumming, some say drum is the mother tongue. And I think so many of us, that primal pulse. And of course, we gestate to mother's heartbeat and blood flow. So it really is something that is a very primal understanding in us all. Sometimes my students come, from all ages, an elder perhaps starting to drum. And of course, so many people say, I don't know if I have rhythm, but of course we have intrinsic rhythm. Rhythm is an organizing principle, the way we walk, sometimes the way we talk. We hear rhythm in nature, and so there is a language there. And I really do also think that music is a universal language. And like you spoke to, Jim, some say that music actually came before even our speech, that it might have helped us to organize into that. And we know, of course, from the deepest ancient origins that we have been making music collectively. And the drum is one where you can play individually, but it also lends itself to this incredible interweaving of people in circle, actually. And I think that the drum is coming back into the collective consciousness, in part because of its simplicity and its archetypal shape. We don't have the actual archaeological record of the drums themselves because they degrade beautifully with the wood and the skin, but we have a powerful archaeological record in the form of art, in relief, hieroglyph, vase painting, votive paintings of our human story with the drum. And so I just found an interest in it, and I followed that thread. I went through, drum sets to kungas, to bongas, to djembe, to dumbek, and I found the frame drum, and I kind of realized that that was what had called me, and it's calling many people of all different walks of life to be back in that rhythmic synchrony. And it really does also teach us about looking at life rhythmically and time as a cycle. And I think it can help us relax in that sense that it's all in right time. There's a great rhythm to all things. And there's seasonal rhythms, there's circadian rhythms, ordinal rhythms. And there's a relaxation in that, especially in a culture that's trying, in a sense, to indoctrinate many of us that there's a certain time that is the right time, or that we should be a certain age and things like that. And when we understand rhythm, it lets us let go into the now and also the cycles of life. And we can also look, just one more piece, historically, how the drum was used as a tool for transforming consciousness and for spirituality, which is part of the conversation today. And it's, of course, highly creative to learn a structure of a rhythm and then also open, like Ron was saying, to that flow, into that channel, to kind of just be present. So that's a little bit about the drum in our human history.
And were you drawn to this as a little girl? Was this something that just was in your being, that gave you no rest till you discovered the particular drum, the frame drum, that you finally realized was your path?
Yes, I would say so. I grew up very, very deeply immersed in music. My mother was a music connoisseur and a seeker, so we went to a lot of music, starting in India at the age of 12, listening to classical Indian music live, and every genre of music. We just covered so much as a kid. So that was already embedded in me. And then I was really looking for an instrument. And it was just one of those serendipitous things where, I started playing the drum set, and people, showed up at my house with the drum set. And I thought, this can't really be it, because it's an albatross, you have to have a big truck and hi-hats and all that. And then one day I walked into a store and I saw a flyer on the wall, and it said, "When the drummers were women." And this was at least maybe 10 years into my drumming journey. And I stopped at that flyer and I thought, what, the drummers are women? That's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? I thought drumming was very masculine. It's kind of like raucous. And so anyway, I went to that workshop, and it ended up being the woman I would study with for 14 years, the late Lane Redmond. And she wrote the book, When the Drummers Were Women. And through that teaching with her, which was a lot about looking at the art in, slideshows of all the ancient artistry, I started to realize about how deep and widespread this archetype really, that is woman with drum or woman with sacred drum. And of course, drumming is for everyone. But we do have a particular history and herstory that is very powerful, drumming in the feminine. And so that kind of caught my attention because of the art. I had also spent a lot of time in museums. So those kind of conferred, the art with the music, the visual art. And I've been kind of following the threads ever since.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, if you think about it, at the beginning of all of human development was the Great Mother, so it would stand to reason that music and that original mother tongue of the drum would have been mediated initially by women in that whole period of the Great Mother, and then evolved, as the men and patriarchy and all of that. So you've been very fortunate to synchronistically find your way back to creation, as it were. It's beautiful, beautiful story. Beautiful story. Thank you. Thank you. And similarly with you, Ron, I really appreciated your remarks, but I wanted to also find out from you, what your pathway was. There's all roads lead to Rome, but you can only kind of walk one at a time.
Yeah.
To get there. So just would love to hear from you, what has been your particular pathway into the illumination of the open heart that you were speaking about. Did you go through the Eastern doorway? Has it been more Abrahamic? What's been your path?
It's definitely the Eastern doorway. And I have to, full disclosure, say that I was playing in a music group in Boston, in Harvard Square, growing up as a teenager, and hanging out in every music store every weekend, taking acoustic guitars and electric guitars down off the wall and all of that. And I would go in the afternoons. The mornings I'd go to the music stores. The afternoons I'd go to the Harvard bookstore. And one afternoon when I was 16, these two books just, how like you go to a bookstore and books just jet out at you. And there was a book, Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Suzuki
Oh,
Roshi.
yes. Yeah.
And then there was a 3-volume on Buddhism by another Suzuki Roshi from the University of Chicago. And so I went and I sat down, and I felt like I had just like come home. I couldn't stop drinking, eating Buddhism. And then I was shuttling between studying existential philosophy and Buddhism. And so then when I transferred from one university in Boston to my junior year in Amherst, a guy on my dorm floor said, hey, would you like some orange sunshine? And I said, what kind of candy is that? And he said, well, why don't you take it by a river some afternoon after class? And so I partook in the experience of LSD 25. And then everything from there unfolded into, I started studying Zen Buddhism, and I was ordained as a lay Zen monk. And then from Zen Buddhism, I've studied for the last 40 years Ashtanga yoga, Vinyasa flow yoga, Iyengar yoga, Tibetan Buddhism, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, mindfulness vipassana. And so my doorway definitely was in through the East for sure. Many, many trips and months and traveling throughout India, Thailand, Bali, Nepal. And so the Eastern thing also grabbed me is when the very first week that I transferred from the college in Boston to Amherst is on a Friday night. I didn't know what to do. So I was wandering around the campus, and I ended up in the student union, and I heard this Om sound, and I had remembered hearing the Om sound from the Moody Blues.
Yeah.
And I just followed it like through this maze of rooms. And I opened the door quietly, and there was probably 200 or 300 people laying flat down in the dark. And there was this little white yogi guy in all white clothes. And he was chanting the Om along with the playback of the music. And so I sat down because obviously I had arrived at Shavasana, the end of the class. And I closed my eyes, and I had this experience of I've come home.
Yeah.
I've come home.
Yeah.
And so my portal was through the heart, and simultaneously through the psychedelic odyssey of really.
You're clearly another 60s guy like I am, because the LSD 25 that was the portal, man. That was the portal.
There was no returning to who Ron Alexander was before, and then after that,
it was BC and AD.
Right, exactly.
Just that experience. Yeah.
It was like going from channel 4 to channel 500.
Yeah.
With everything.
By a river on a sunny afternoon. Well done.
Exactly. Done. Hour after hour of, going inside, and then, going through. And I think Krista just said something about the musical language, and Sanskrit is a musical language. The very first letter in Sanskrit is A, Ah. And what is the universal portal? Aum, Aum. And so if we follow our inner sounds, that also can take us to very sacred and creative places. And it's fun. It's interesting, Krista, the woman you studied with, Redmond, she and I spent a week together 20 years ago at an Ericksonian conference. We sat down together in this room of like 2,500 people watching someone demonstrate Ericksonian hypnosis. And then every night we would go out to dinner and we would talk and take walks. And I remember her saying, I think I'm going to start a workshop. And I think I'll title it, When the Women Were First Drummers.
Love that synchronicity. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Everything.
So what do you think of all this, Celia?
I think it's great. I'm happy. I'm happy. I feel creative. I'm to be here with all of you. I have great respect for all of you. So
Well, one of the, go
we
ahead.
need, I just think I don't think I mentioned enough that creativity and all this interaction with the arts is just so healing. And we need to do this human interaction right now desperately, especially because of AI, and we might just totally get upgraded. So we need to, and the social media is horrible. So we need this kind of interaction, which is why one of the reasons why I love Humanity Rising. It's like a lifeline for me because it's real human interaction about issues that I care about. Like, what is more important? Nothing, really.
Well, you know, I mean, we've been even discussing over the last couple of days, to your point, Ron, about LSD, you know, the synchronicity between when humanity split the atom and unleashed nuclear war as a possibility. Almost simultaneously, Albert Hofmann was developing LSD in Switzerland.
Yes.
And so to have that chemistry of total destruction and the chemistry of total enlightenment simultaneously and available has been an extraordinary double helix, I would say, in human consciousness over the last 75 years. And, you know, and I think, Krista, that's where the power of drumming, I mean, just think of what Michael Harner did with drumming and Redman and so forth and so on, that what began to burst out as the human psyche went through this cosmic explosion out of the 60s and the psychedelics is people very naturally, and I think inexorably, went to the shamanic primordial beginnings of human consciousness. And out of that shamanic beginning comes drumming. I mean, I spent some time with Michael Harner, you know, and he could take you into states with drumming very similar to what you would access through LSD and psychedelics, but also what Stan Grof did through the holotropic breath work. You know, so, you know, it's an extraordinary juxtaposition of opposites, you know, what Jung would call an antinomy of two seemingly completely mutually exclusive phenomena, you know, nuclear war in the age of overkill and LSD, shamanic illumination, you know, the human potential movement on the other side, and how at this critical hour, when we're really coming down to the short strokes of possible self-destruction, psychedelics are now becoming more and more available. You know, the drumming, the creativity, the spirituality, the global spirituality now is more available to human beings than ever before in human history. So the choice point that we're at is stark, but it's also unbelievably potentiated. So anyway, I'd just throw that out for any comments any of you would like to make.
Well, I think you touched on a very, very important, very, very important point. And I had the unique opportunity to spend some time. I was an intern with Stan Grof in the early 70s, and he introduced me to Albert Hofmann. And so I got to spend a couple of hours with Albert Hofmann, and similar to what you just had said, is that he really saw the downloading of the formula that he came across really by trial and error in his laboratory as the counterbalance, the healing antidote for the development of the nuclear bomb. which was
Exactly.
destruction and the dissolution of the planet at the end of Albert Hoffman's life, which is when I met him here in Los Angeles, is he said that he really came to understand that it was more than just that he had developed a medicine for the soul, but he said that he experienced his contribution was a medicine both for the individual soul and the collective soul, which would over time, his hope was that the psychedelics would take us from the external conflicts of war and turmoil to the inner peace and bring about peace and prosperity. As you said, human potential, the activation and the healing of the planet. So psychedelics now, psychiatry, medicine, we're starting to embrace them. And I think within the next 5 to 7 years, depending upon the current future political administrations, ketamine, psilocybin, microdosing, all of these things are having much more profound, useful and healing effects than some of the designer medicines that we came up with in the 90s. Because it's soul medicine and psyche medicine.
Yeah, exactly. Well, even here in Washington, I just moved to Washington, and I was walking around DuPont Circle a couple of days ago, and I smelled the wonderful scent of cannabis, and saw that there was a smoke shop, and went in and said, I didn't know that it was legal in DC within blocks of the White House to sell marijuana. They said, yeah, man. And, we've got all kinds of psychedelics, and it was just there on the counter.
Yes.
And I thought, what an extraordinary thing. Here on the one hand, the Congress is in complete turmoil. They're overthrowing Kevin McCarthy. And a few blocks away, the illumination that you're speaking of and that Albert Hoffman brought into the world is available legally and for a very inexpensive price. So all things are now possible in this world. Krista, what do you think about all this?
What it speaks to me about is the human quest for transforming consciousness and altering consciousness. And it's also really, we could interchange somewhat the words the flow or the zone. And I think that if we start to really look at creativity as a way to alter consciousness, to get into the zone, to get into the flow, and that we can do that through acting, we can do that through drumming, through painting, through working with clay and things like that. And I think sometimes we underestimate the power of just pure creativity to alter consciousness, where yes, people are microdosing and doing things like that with, substances, which we have done from the very beginnings of time, taking in entheogens in different forms. And there's that whole classification of altering consciousness through a substance. But there's this all other endogenous, inward arising. We have a whole medicine.
Very important. Yeah.
We have a whole pharmacopoeia inside of the hormonal secretions. And that's what the yogis taught us. They said there are hormonal secretions that you can activate through hugging your friend for a good 3 minutes. You can get some oxytocin going. Through drumming, it's possible that you might tap into, some of the neurotransmitters and things like that. So I love this intersection of the external, taking in some sacrament, but I also really love the modern science that's really pointing us towards the endogenous. And that is where the intersection of creativity, spirituality, and consciousness to me really intersect.
Yeah, that's such a profound point because, psychedelics are only one of many pathways. And you're making, I think, a very seminal point that there's some things, better living through chemistry, but there's also better living through just activating your own creativity. I've read articles that when an artist sits down to paint in that creative flow, their brain waves are at the same level of these yogis sitting in a Himalayan cave in a high state of meditation. So that there are many ways to get to that flow zone that you're speaking of. And one way isn't any better than another way, just like, your pathway to the frame drum was your pathway to the instrument that spoke most deeply to you. And John Lennon used a guitar. So that's a very important point, so that people don't feel that they have to be something or do something that isn't naturally suited to them.
Yes, there's many pathways.
Exactly.
And it's important to understand the difference between what we call in transpersonal psychology, that was articulated by Ken Wilber, the stage approach, which is developmental,
Exactly.
learning yoga, Tai Chi, drumming, various forms of meditation or prayer, developmental building of stage, versus the kind of quick in, quick out state approach.
Exactly.
And thinking, well, that's enlightenment because I went out to the desert and I did ayahuasca 3 times for the weekend and I don't have to do anything. Well, ethnogens are good as an awakening, but then I think there's an importance as you come back down
Exactly.
to earth to then start to do the work, and that involves discipline and practice. And of course, in acting, if we go back to acting, it's a craft. You have to use the instrument of yourself. If you're practicing learning to play the drum or the guitar, like me, and piano, it takes effort and discipline and perseverance. And so there's many pathways, but sometimes people think that just by embracing the psychedelics, that's the exclusive pathway. And it really,
very good point.
It's just a door.
Yeah, exactly. So Celia, we'll give the final word to you as we wrap up. Thank you all so much. This has been a very
wonderful
conversation.
Just also in agreement that's what we are as actors, we are the pharmacopoeia, we are the instruments. So that's how you get emotional response with the sensory work. What Krista was talking about too is your body responds to the stimulus and not the mind. So everything that everyone has said today, but you understand that point. Yes, everybody. Yes. So it was just amazing. Thank you so much for having us, Jim, as a guest.
Yes, thank you very, very much.
So great. I'm so happy, and bless you.
Thank you, Celia. Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Ron. Let's do this again. This
Yeah.
is a nice combination of intelligences and perspective.
They're wonderful. That's why I invited them. I thought, yeah, they're great.
Yeah, this is
Beautiful.
very
Really beautiful.
very
Thank
beautiful, very rich. Love to do
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. That'll
Thank
do
you.
it for us for today. You're all welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. And for those of you watching passively, you'll have received the link in your Zoom reminder. And then next week, we're going to start a 5-day program on compassion with people from all over the world that have been seeking to both understand the dimensionality of compassion, but also how all of us in a world fraught with tension, constraints, fear, anxiety, and stress can manifest compassion in our daily lives. And as Krista was pointing out, thereby release healing hormones and chemical sequences that bring forth a beatific heart and mind. So that's next week on Humanity Rising. But thank you, Krista, Ron, Celia. Wonderful session today. And enjoy your weekend, everyone. See you Monday. Bye for now.